The Reluctant Alliance. The 7 moons of Phelos Prime glowed like phantom eyes in the violet sky as High Commander Vexor stared out from the observation deck. His scaled hands trembled slightly, something that would have been unthinkable mere cycles ago. The Kravarians had always been known for their unwavering resolve, their tactical brilliance. Now they stood on the precipice of extinction. "The council is assembled, Commander," announced his adjutant, Nixel. The young officer's voice betrayed the same apprehension that had infected the entire fleet. Vexor straightened his posture. "And our guests. They've docked. 5 of them, as agreed." The commander nodded grimly. "Humans. Of all the species in the galaxy, we find ourselves begging help from humans." The council chamber fell silent as Vexor entered. 20 of the most decorated military minds in Kravarian history, reduced to desperate measures. At the center of the room stood 5 humans, small, soft-skinned creatures that somehow commanded the space around them, with an ease that made Vexor uncomfortable. "I am Admiral Helena Chen of the United Earth Defense Force," said the central figure, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that seemed to evaluate everything simultaneously. "We received your distress signal. My team and I are here to help, if possible." Elder Kraz, the oldest council member, hissed softly. "The Nexeri horde has destroyed 17 of our colonies. Their high ships consume everything in their path. Our most advanced weapons merely slow their advance. What could your species possibly offer that ours cannot?" Admiral Chen's expression remained neutral. A different perspective. The human team consisted of the admiral, 2 military officers, a diplomat, and a civilian scientist. They listened as the Kravarians detailed the Nexeri threat, a collective consciousness of insectoid beings that had emerged from deep space 18 months ago, consuming resources and adding biological material to their ever-growing high ships. "You've been fighting them conventionally," observed Commander Jackson, one of the human officers. "Fleet formations, directed energy weapons, and defensive perimeters. How else would one fight a war?" asked Vexor. The humans exchanged glances. "War isn't just about firepower," Admiral Chen said. "It's about understanding your enemy, finding their weak points, and sometimes avoiding conflict altogether." The council chamber erupted in dismissive chatters. Vexor raised a hand to silence them. "We have studied the Nexeri for months. They have no weak points. They do not negotiate. They only consume." Dr. Ilara Shah, the human scientist, activated a holographic display. "May I?" Without waiting for permission, she projected the data the Kravarians had shared. "Your scans reveal something interesting about the Nexeri high ships. They're not just vessels, they're organisms." "We know this," said Elder Kraz impatiently. "Then you also know that all organisms have needs, vulnerabilities, and instincts," Dr. Shah continued calmly. "The Nexeri aren't mindless. They're efficient. There's a difference." For the next 6 hours, the humans asked questions no Kravarian had thought to consider. Not about weapons or shields, but about Nexeri communication patterns, resource preferences, and behavioral changes when damaged. Questions that seemed irrelevant to warfare. "This is pointless," Elder Thex finally erupted. "While we discuss, the horde advances. 2 more colonies will fall before the next cycle." Admiral Chen stood. "High Commander Vexor, lend us one of your scout ships and a small team. Let us show you what humans can do." Vexor studied the human leader carefully. Their species' history was riddled with internal conflict and seemingly primitive technology, yet they had survived and thrived, expanding rapidly across their sector. Perhaps there was something to be learned. "You have 1 cycle," he declared. "Prove your worth, or we will pursue other options." The scout ship Talon departed with a minimal crew, 3 Kravarians, including Nixel, and the 5 humans. They headed for Sector 9, where a small Nexeri scout was reported to be harvesting resources from an uninhabited moon. "Your plan is to capture a Nexeri vessel. Nixel asked incredulously as they approached their target. Hundreds have tried. None have succeeded. Lieutenant Rice, the second human officer, smiled. We're not going to capture it. We're going to talk to it. Before Nixel could respond, Dr. Shah activated a device that emitted a complex pattern of electromagnetic pulses. The Nexari scout ship immediately altered course, heading straight for them. They've detected us, shouted the Kravarian pilot. Preparing evasive maneuvers. Hold position, commanded Admiral Chen. Trust us. The Nexari vessel approached, extending its harvesting appendages, metallic tendrils designed to tear apart ships and extract useful materials. The Nexari vessel approached, extending its harvesting appendages, metallic tendrils designed to tear apart ships and extract useful materials. Now, Dr. Shah. Chen nodded. The scientist adjusted her device, changing the pulse pattern. The Nexari ship slowed, its tendrils pausing in mid-extension. They communicate through electromagnetic fields, explained Dr. Shah. We've been studying similar collective organisms on Earth. We're not speaking their language fluently yet, but we've learned to say not food at least. The Kravarians watched in stunned silence as the Nexari vessel hovered nearby, seemingly confused. Then Commander Jackson activated another device, this one projecting a holographic image of a much larger Nexari ship. And now we're saying bigger meal elsewhere, Jackson explained with a slight grin. The Nexari scout retracted its appendages and veered away, accelerating toward the coordinates implied in the false signal. It will realize the deception, Nixel said. Eventually, agreed Admiral Chen. But we've learned something valuable. The Nexari aren't mindless destroyers. They're rational consumers following a biological imperative. They can be redirected. When they returned to the Kravarian command ship, footage of the encounter spread quickly through the ranks. Some dismissed it as a mere trick that wouldn't work on larger high ships. Others saw the first glimmer of hope in months. Diversion tactics will not win this war, Elder Kraz argued during the emergency council session. No, but understanding the enemy will, countered Admiral Chen. Your species has been fighting the Nexari as if they were like you, strategic, honor-bound, driven by conquest. They're not. They're more like a virus or a consuming fire, following the path of least resistance toward the greatest resources. Vexer leaned forward. What do you propose? A three-pronged approach, said Admiral Chen. First, we develop more sophisticated electromagnetic countermeasures to confuse their communication. Second, we make your valuable worlds appear less appetizing while creating false targets. Third, we identify exactly what the Nexari are seeking and find a way to provide it that doesn't involve consuming your civilization. The diplomatic human, Ms. Rivera, who had remained quiet until now, added, on Earth, we've had parasites that became symbionts over time, predators that became protectors, enemies that became allies. It's possible. For 2 intensive weeks, the humans worked alongside Kravarian scientists and warriors. They were strange allies. The humans worked in chaotic patterns, followed unconventional logic, and sometimes seemed to reach conclusions based on what they called intuition. They slept when they should have been working and made jokes in the face of extinction. Yet results couldn't be denied. The electromagnetic disruption fields they developed caused Nexari scouts to become disoriented. The holographic decoys drew smaller high ships away from populated worlds. It wasn't enough to turn the tide, but it bought precious time. Then came the Battle of Narmis IV. A major Kravarian agricultural world, Narmis IV supplied food for billions. 3 Nexari high ships, each the size of a small moon, emerged from hyperspace and began their approach. The Kravarian defense fleet moved to intercept, with Vexer commanding from his flagship. Conventional formation, he ordered. Prepare the new disruption fields. Admiral Chen, who had been invited to observe, studied the tactical display. Commander, with respect, this is the perfect opportunity to try something more ambitious. There are 4 billion lives at stake. Vexor replied coldly, "This is not the time for experimentation." Chen's expression hardened. "This is exactly the time. Your conventional tactics have failed against hive ships of this size. Let us show you the human way of war." After a tense silence, Vexor reluctantly nodded. "What do you propose?" "Asymmetric warfare," Chen replied. "Divide your fleet into 5 groups. 4 small, 1 large. The large group maintains distance and appears to protect the planet. The small groups look like they're retreating in disarray." "You want me to appear weak before the enemy?" Vexor was aghast. "I want you to appear exactly as they expect," Chen corrected. "Meanwhile, we smuggle specialized teams onto the surface with our prototype." The prototype was a massive electromagnetic pulse generator, developed by combining human ingenuity with Kraverian technology. It couldn't destroy a hive ship, but the humans claimed it could do something more valuable: disrupt the Nexeri collective consciousness temporarily. Against his better judgment, Vexor approved the plan. The Kraverian fleet engaged as directed, appearing to struggle against the overwhelming Nexeri force. As predicted, the hive ships pushed forward, focusing on the main defensive line while largely ignoring the scattered smaller groups. Meanwhile, human and Kraverian special forces landed on Narmis IV, positioning the prototype at strategic points around the planet. "They're entering the atmosphere," reported Nixel, who had been assigned as liaison to the human team. "Harvesting appendages deployed." "Activate on my mark," ordered Commander Jackson, who led the ground operation. 3, 2, 1, now. The prototype activated, sending powerful electromagnetic waves specifically tuned to the Nexeri communication frequency. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The hive ships froze in mid-descent, their appendages flailing wildly. For the first time, the collective seemed confused, even panicked. "All ships, attack the harvesting appendages," ordered Vexor, seizing the opportunity. The Kraverian vessels converged from all directions, concentrating fire on the temporarily vulnerable extensions. By the time the Nexeri recovered, they had suffered unprecedented damage. For the first time since their appearance, the hive ships retreated. In the aftermath, as Kraverian engineers studied the severed Nexeri appendages, Vexor found Admiral Chen on the observation deck, gazing at the stars. "Your tactics were unorthodox," the High Commander admitted, "but effective." Chen smiled slightly. "Humans learned warfare the hard way, Commander. Through millennia of fighting each other, we discovered that superior numbers and technology don't always prevail. Sometimes the smaller, weaker force wins through adaptation, deception, and targeting vulnerabilities." "You made us appear weak to reveal the enemy's weakness," Vexor observed. "No Kraverian commander would have considered such a strategy." "That's why you called us," Chen replied. "Not because we're stronger or more advanced, but because we think differently. The Nexeri have never encountered humans before. They don't know our playbook." For the first time in months, Vexor felt something close to hope. "Perhaps calling humans wasn't our last resort," he said. "Perhaps it should have been our first." Paradigm shift. The victory at Narmis IV sent ripples through both the Kraverian Empire and the Nexeri horde. For the first time, the seemingly unstoppable advance had been halted. On the Kraverian command ship, the atmosphere had subtly shifted from despair to cautious optimism. The humans, once viewed with skepticism, now moved through the corridors, receiving respectful nods from warriors twice their size. But Admiral Chen knew better than to celebrate prematurely. "They're adapting," she announced during the strategy session 3 days after the battle. "The electromagnetic disruption won't work the same way twice. The Nexeri are modifying their communication frequencies." High Commander Vexor's expression darkened. "So your solution was temporary." "Every solution is temporary in war," replied Chen calmly. "The key is to adapt faster than your enemy." Dr. Shaw projected her latest findings. "The Nexeri aren't just changing frequencies. They're altering their entire approach. The hive ships are dividing into smaller units, making them less vulnerable to our disruption fields. The Kravarian generals exchanged concerned glances. Their brief moment of hope was evaporating. "But this gives us valuable information," continued the human scientist. "The Nexeri Collective can learn. It can change strategy based on experience. That confirms our theory. They're not mindless consumers. They're intelligent in their own way." "How does this help us?" demanded Elder Kras. Lieutenant Reyes stepped forward. "If they can learn, they can be taught. If they can change strategy, they can also change objectives." For the next 2 weeks, humans and Kravarians worked together developing new approaches. The Nexeri had withdrawn to regroup, giving them precious time. The humans insisted on analyzing everything recovered from the damaged high ships, not just technology, but organic components, energy signatures, and waste products. "They're primarily seeking specific rare minerals," Dr. Shaw announced after completing her analysis, "particularly concentrated forms of thorium and palladium compounds. Their biology seems to use these elements as catalysts for their growth cycles. These elements are present on many of our worlds," said Vexer. "That's why they target our colonies." Ms. Rivera, the human diplomat, looked thoughtful. "Do you have uninhabited worlds with these resources, or extraction facilities that could concentrate them?" A plan began to form, creating designated extraction sites on uninhabited worlds and making them detectable to Nexeri sensors. Essentially, setting out bait to redirect the horde. But before it could be implemented, disaster struck. 3 massive Nexeri motherships, dwarfing the previous high ships, appeared near Thelos Prime itself, the heart of Kravarian civilization. Home to over 20 billion citizens and the seat of their government, its fall would mean the end of their species. The Kravarian defense fleet mobilized in full force. Every ship, every weapon, every warrior stood ready to make their last stand. The humans' prototype disruptors were deployed, but as predicted, they had minimal effect against the adapted Nexeri vessels. "We cannot hold them off indefinitely," Vexer admitted as the first wave of Nexeri harvesters breached the outer defense line. "Admiral Chen, if you have any more human surprises, now is the time." Chen exchanged glances with her team before responding. "There is one option, but it's extreme. We've been hesitant to suggest it because it violates your ethical codes of warfare." "Our civilization faces extinction," replied Vexer grimly. "Ethics are a luxury we can no longer afford." Chen nodded. "Commander Jackson, contact Earth. Request Protocol Omega." Within hours, 5 human warships emerged from hyperspace, vessels unlike any the Kravarians had seen before. They were smaller than Kravarian battlecruisers, but moved with incredible speed and precision. "What are those devices on their hulls?" asked Nixel, observing from the command deck. "Nanite deployment systems," explained Commander Jackson. "Similar to your bioweapons, but specifically engineered for this situation." Elder Kras hissed in alarm. "Bioweapons are forbidden by the ancient accords." "These aren't designed to kill," clarified Jackson. "They're programmed to infiltrate, communicate, and redirect." The human warships darted between the lumbering Nexeri motherships, releasing clouds of microscopic machines. The Kravarians watched in disbelief as the nanites penetrated the organic components of the Nexeri vessels, spreading throughout their systems. "What's happening?" demanded Vexer, as the massive motherships suddenly ceased their advance. Admiral Chen's expression was solemn. "The nanites are establishing a direct interface with the Nexeri collective consciousness. They're speaking to them in their own language, not just electromagnetic signals, but biochemical communication. You can communicate directly with the Horde." Vexer was stunned. "Not exactly conversation," Chen replied. "More like creating sensations and impulses. Right now, we're making Thelos Prime taste bad to them, while making the uninhabited mining world in the next system seem irresistible." The strategy worked. The motherships slowly changed course, moving away from Thelos Prime toward the designated world, a barren planet rich in the minerals the Nexeri craved. "This is more than a temporary solution," explained Dr. Shah as they monitored the Nexari's departure. The nanites aren't just redirecting them. They're establishing a permanent communication channel. We're beginning to understand their needs and motivations. Over the following months, a strange new paradigm emerged. The Kravarians established automated mining operations on uninhabited worlds, extracting and processing the specific mineral compounds the Nexari required. The Nexari, in turn, began to limit their consumption to these designated areas. "It's not peace," Admiral Chen explained to the Kravarian Council. "At least not yet. It's more like a mutual understanding. The Nexari get what they need without conflict. You preserve your civilization." "A symbiosis," observed Elder Morith, who had replaced the more militant Elder Kraz, "like the fungi-root relationships on our forest worlds." "Exactly," agreed Ms. Rivera. "This is how seemingly incompatible species learn to coexist. It begins with identifying mutual needs and establishing boundaries." 6 cycles after the humans' arrival, a formal delegation from Earth arrived to establish permanent diplomatic relations with both the Kravarian Empire and, remarkably, representatives of the Nexari collective consciousness. The meeting took place on a neutral space station orbiting Thelos Prime. The human delegation was led by Admiral Chen, now appointed as Earth's ambassador. The Kravarians were represented by High Commander Vexer and the Council of Elders. The Nexari sent 3 drones, small organic vessels containing neural matter connected to the hive mind. "This is unprecedented," Vexer said as they prepared to enter the chamber. "No one has ever negotiated with the Nexari before." "No one ever tried to understand them before," replied Chen. "You saw them only as predators, not as another form of life with its own imperatives." The negotiations were unlike any in galactic history. The humans acted as intermediaries, translating Kravarian proposals into biochemical signals the Nexari could comprehend, then interpreting the electromagnetic and pheromonal responses. By the end of the summit, a remarkable agreement had been reached. The Kravarians would provide the Nexari with the specific resources they required from uninhabited worlds. In exchange, the Nexari would share the unique biotechnological advancements they had developed through their collective intelligence. As the delegations prepared to depart, Vexer sought out Admiral Chen. "When we first called upon humans, we viewed you as our last desperate option," the High Commander admitted. "We expected you to bring superior weapons or overwhelming force. Instead, you brought understanding and changed the very nature of the conflict." Chen smiled. "That's the human way, Commander. Throughout our history, our greatest victories haven't come from destroying our enemies, but from transforming them into allies. Not through force, but through empathy and innovation. Your species is young compared to ours," Vexer observed. "You've barely ventured beyond your own system. Yet you possess wisdom that has eluded the ancient races." "Perhaps because we've made so many mistakes," Chen replied. "Earth's history is filled with wars, genocides, and environmental disasters. We nearly destroy ourselves many times over, but we learn from each catastrophe." The impact of the human intervention extended far beyond the Kravarian-Nexari conflict. Word spread throughout the galactic community of how a primitive species from an unregarded system had resolved an existential threat through diplomacy and understanding rather than superior firepower. One stellar year after the crisis, representatives from 27 spacefaring civilizations gathered on Earth for the founding of the Interstellar Diplomatic Corps. The principles established during the Nexari conflict became the foundation for a new approach to interspecies relations. In the Great Hall of the United Nations in New York, High Commander Vexer, now serving as the Kravarian ambassador to Earth, addressed the assembled delegates. "The galaxy has long measured civilization by technological advancement," he began. "By this standard, many of you considered humans primitive, as did we. Their ships are smaller, their weapons less powerful, their colonies fewer. Yet when faced with an enemy that our advanced weaponry could not defeat, it was human ingenuity that prevailed." He gestured toward the Earth delegation, where Admiral Chen sat alongside her team. Humans reminded us of something our ancestors knew, but we had forgotten in our pursuit of power. True strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to transform conflict into cooperation. They showed us that sometimes the most powerful weapon is understanding your enemy. As the applause echoed through the hall, Chen reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From being considered a last resort, barely worth considering in a galactic conflict, humans had rewritten the rules of interstellar relations. The Nexeri, once viewed as mindless devourers, were now recognized as a unique form of collective intelligence with their own valid place in the cosmos. The Kravarians, once rigid in their military traditions, had embraced a more flexible diplomatic approach to security, and humanity, in helping others find peace, had secured its own position among the stars. Not through conquest or technological superiority, but through their distinctive ability to see possibilities where others saw only threats, to find common ground in seemingly irreconcilable differences. As the formal session ended and representatives mingled, a junior Kravarian diplomat approached Chen. "Is it true," the young alien asked hesitantly, "that humans once fought primarily among themselves? That your greatest conflicts were with your own kind?" Chen nodded. "For most of our history, we divided ourselves by geography, ideology, religion, even by superficial physical differences. We nearly destroyed our planet and ourselves many times over. How did you overcome such internal strife?" "We haven't entirely," Chen admitted. "But each generation learned a little more about cooperation, about seeing beyond differences. When we finally looked to the stars, we began to understand how small our divisions really were against the vastness of the universe." The diplomat considered this. "So your fractured history became your strength when facing the wider galaxy?" "Exactly," Chen smiled. "Because we had to learn to bridge seemingly insurmountable differences among ourselves, we developed the skills to bridge the gaps between entirely different species. Our greatest weakness became our greatest strength." As night fell over Earth, diplomats from dozens of worlds looked up at the same stars, contemplating a galaxy that was beginning to transcend its ancient patterns of conquest and conflict. The Nexeri still consumed, the Kravarians still defended, humans still explored, each following their nature. But now they did so with greater awareness of the other's place in the cosmic order. And in distant reaches of space, word continued to spread of the species that had been called upon as a last resort and had instead become the architects of a new beginning. Humans, with their strange mix of empathy and determination, their ability to see patterns others missed, their willingness to try the untried and think the unfought, had changed the rules of engagement forever. In the vast game of cosmic survival, they had shown that sometimes the winning move isn't to overpower your opponent, but to change the nature of the game itself.